Hi, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of STEM Girls Virtual, where we talk about all the careers in the STEM fields. Those fields are science, technology, engineering, and math. My name is Becca, and I am here on behalf of Cincinnati Museum Center with a very special guest today. In honor of Father's Day, we have a very, very special guest. We have talked to so many amazing women and so many amazing mothers, but today we are going to talk to an amazing dad, and he is my dad. So, hi. Dad, how's it going?
Good morning, Becca. Nice to be here with you.
Thank you, Dad. So my dad's name is Dr. Evan Blumer, and he is the founder and principal for Osomono Ltd, which is a consulting group that focuses on wildlife, habitat, and energy conservation strategies. So we're going to talk about a lot of really cool stuff today, and I'm sure just have fun with my dad. So, Dad, without further ado, you ready to jump into things?
Let's go.
Let's do it. All right, so the first question is, can you tell us a little bit more about your job and explain to us what it is that you do? I know that I know a lot of stuff about what you do, but I'm always learning about more things that you're doing, so tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, well, I think you've started off with probably the hardest question of all to begin with, because what I do is something that has changed a lot over the course of my career, and I think that's one of the things we really want to talk about today. And I also do a bunch of things. So I sort of have to tell you this and tell your viewers this in a bit of an order. So I started off as a high school kid, even a grade school kid. I wanted to be a doctor. In fact, I wanted to be a surgeon. And I was completely committed to that. I did all of the things in school, out of school, extracurriculars that were all focused on that. And when I went off to college, I started with my intent was to pursue that. But unfortunately, I got a little disillusioned with the whole sort of process that I was in and the sort of cutthroat aspects of what I was dealing with back then. I hope things have changed a bit. And I ended up finding a really interesting pathway in a field called animal behavior. And why I pursued this was because it interested me, it captured my curiosity. It also gave me all of the prerequisites that I needed to pursue medical school or pursue other things, because essentially it was a double major of biology and experimental psychology, really looking at how those two things fit together. So I did that as my undergraduate work, and when it was over time, as I mentioned, I got sort of disillusioned with pursuing human medicine, but I got really excited by the field that I was in. Publishing papers, I went off to pursue my PhD in that same field. But the first of a number of turns began to happen. As I was working on my PhD, I began to get a lot of really, good questions from my advisors and my peers, all of whom were leaders in their field, but they were struggling to fund their programs. So they said to me, look, you're good at this and you're dedicated, but here we are struggling to keep our labs open. How are you going to do this? We think you should pursue something different. So they said, you should go to vet school. I said, well, I can't get into vet school. That's too hard. It's way harder than medical school. But they said, no, you can get in. You have all these unique skills. So at that point, I took a break. I was very fortunate to get a really excellent position with the Philadelphia Zoo, where I worked as a special assistant to the president, working on all kinds of things. And over the couple of years, I spent some time thinking about, did I want to finish my PhD or did I want to go to vet school? In the end of the day, after a couple of years, and huge thanks to the Philadelphia Zoo, because they gave me opportunities that almost nobody could have had and allowed me to be flexible in my thinking. But at the end of the day, I decided to go to vet school, or try to get into vet school at least, because I felt that it gave me more options. And it gave me some things that I could pursue if, in fact, my chosen field of more research-oriented, science-oriented, wildlife-oriented things didn't pan out. So I did that. I was very fortunate to go to the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia and spent another 4 years in their veterinary program there. And in 1988, I graduated with my Doctor of Veterinary Medicine degree, or in my school, it was the Latin term, so it was a VMD. It's the only school that gives you the VMD. Everybody else gives you the DMV, or DVM, excuse me, DVM. And so that began what was, sort of the first big phase of my career. I was completely focused on zoo and wildlife issues. I was particularly focused on endangered species conservation issues. And I was able to spend, a considerable portion of my career focused on that, first as a wildlife veterinarian, and then more as a research and animal health, sort of program leader, and eventually moving on to a CEO role running a major conservation center. For those of, well, I'm sure all of your viewers are here in Ohio. I started that part of my career in Texas at a facility called the Fossil Rim Wildlife Center, which is in sort of outside of Dallas and Fort Worth. And then we came to Ohio in 1994. You were 2.5 years old at the time. And we moved here to play a major role in starting a place called the Wilds. The Wilds is in Ohio. It's in the east or southeastern part of the state. It's a 10,000 acre conservation, breeding, and research facility, and one of the most unique facilities of its kind in the world. And I spent, the majority of my career there as a veterinarian, and then as the head of conservation and science programs, and then all programs, and then CEO. So at the end of 2010, after I had been at the Wilds for 18 years, it was time for me to find something different to do. And this is because I had done a lot of what I wanted to do. It was time to pursue some of my other interests. And that's going to be the theme through a lot of what we talk about today. If you get the right foundation and you get the right set of skills, the future is unlimited for you, and particularly with, in these STEM fields. And if you have the right foundation, you don't have to think about your career as a destination. You could think about your career as a journey. And all you really have to be thinking about is, what is the thing I want to do next, not the thing I want to do at the end, because lots of opportunities open up, interests mature and develop over time. And for me, it's allowed me to be in this position I am in now. So now I run a small consulting firm that does a lot of wildlife work, a lot of habitat and park development work, big national parks and urban parks as well, and also a lot of stuff in the renewable and advanced energy space. These were my interests. And because I had the right skill set, because I had built the foundation and relationships and had the creativity, I was able to pull those all together and create an entity that just does what I want to do. So now I work on a range of things. I work on designing zoos and wildlife and conservation centers around the world as part of the various design teams. I'm working in the Middle East on developing some large-scale protected areas. I'm also working on major energy projects. I'm working on some huge solar initiatives here in Ohio, and even working on some giant carbon capture things. So I'm often in a situation where I'm well outside of any of the training that I had, but that outside perspective, along with a good set of basic skills, gives me the ability sometimes to see beyond what my partners and my colleagues can see, because they're constrained by their, and having a broad set play a really unique role in all kinds of things. So to answer your question, at the bottom line, what end of the day, what do I do? I wake up every day. I get to work on exciting projects that I'm interested in. I get to work with people that I choose to work with, and I can do all of that in a way that has major impact on the world.
Thank you, Dad. And I think the biggest takeaway from all of that for our viewers is that, one, you don't have to know the end of your story. And that is something that my dad has instilled in me. And we've talked about with so many other guests that we've had on this show. You don't have to know the end of your story. That's okay. And if you are interested in something, keep pushing, keep going, and keep finding new ways to work with that interest. There's always a way. You just have to find your own path on how to get there. And then you could be doing something amazing with your life. Like my dad, you could be doing something like I'm doing, where I get to talk to all these wonderful people and I love it every day. But I didn't know the end of my story. So, and this isn't the end. So I think that's really important to take away from that. So Dad, our next question is, please tell us what sparked your interest in this field. Did you always want to go into this, or did it grow into what it is now? And you talked a little bit about, you thought you were going to be a surgeon, and now then you went to vet school, and now you are back in what you wanted to do. But at any point, what really like sparked the interest in all of this? And were there things that you kind of found yourself like falling into, like you were fortunate enough to find something, did everything, were you working towards everything that you got to? Just tell us a little bit about your journey in that aspect.
Okay, well, first of all, let me start off with a really important thing. Go Bearcats. Um,
Sad.
but I say that partly joking and partly seriously, because I think one of the best things about the UC programs, as I saw them as a parent, was this focus on co-ops and outside work and being exposed to real careers. And why I want to mention that is because, we're in this educational track. We learn the things you need to learn to be qualified to do the job, but we don't really learn much about doing the actual job. And I think real world experiences, whether they're when you're in high school joining, a local explorers group that might study it, that might be focused on a field you're interested in, or doing some volunteer work, or spending some time in programs like STEM Girls, they will expose you to things not just that you haven't thought about, but from a different perspective than you've thought about. So the biggest thing I can say is get out in the world, have as many experiences as you can, because studying something isn't the same as doing that thing. So, my journey is my journey, and everybody has to figure out their own. For me, I think I've been a scientist since my earliest memory. My parents always talked about how I would take apart alarm clocks to try to figure out how they would work. But I even think about it back until I was having dinner, how I would cut my piece of chicken, looking at how things work. So I've always sort of had that perspective. I think the other thing that's really important in this, in terms of shaping the person, and one of the things that we've, really focused on here in our home with you and your brothers, is that it can't just be science. It can't just be technology. It can't just be math. It has to also be balanced. You have to live a life. And we believe, your mom, Lynn, my wife, and I believe that it's a mix of arts and sciences that really gives you the broad, perspective that you want to do. And so I highly encourage, your STEM girls, along with STEM parents, to, even if you want your daughter or your son to pursue a technical career, make sure they're being exposed to the arts, reading, singing, playing an instrument, learning how to paint. Any of those things work a different and really complementary part of your brain and your personality and your worldview that I think really go together. So for me, my father was a musician. That part was always in my life. Music played a big part of my life. And so I think that gave me both the sort of the analytical side of my brain and the creative side of my brain that drove me forward. The next thing was simply mastering each step and knowing that it's just a step and moving on to the next one. So I did, I was going to be a surgeon. Then I became a research scientist. Then I became a veterinarian, focused on research again. Eventually I became the CEO of an organization. All of those things all require different skills and knowledge, but having a strong foundation in the sciences, in sort of logical and analytical ways of approaching a problem and solve them, that fit really well for me with the other half, which is the creative side. How do you creatively solve a problem? And so whether I was doing, pre-med or animal behavior or working on my PhD or going to vet school, or then this amazing rich career that I've had, and that's the thing I want to tell you, you know it, Becca, but I have had an amazing career. I've had an amazing set of opportunities. I've worked in over 30 countries. I've done some of the most, some of the most remote and amazing places on the planet. That's where I've worked with some incredible species. All of that is because I built a strong foundation that gave me knowledge, specific knowledge, but perhaps more importantly, a way to go out and learn more of what I needed to learn. Not
Thank
sure
you.
if that completely answered your question, but that's
No, it
how I think
does.
of it.
It does, because it really it makes the point of, you didn't just grow into this. You didn't just find yourself in this. You worked toward this, and you set up the first layer. You set that foundation to let yourself branch out. And I think that's very important for our viewers to know. You do have to set up some foundation. What that foundation is, you know that it's different for everyone, but once you have that, you can go anywhere you want to go. You can keep setting up more steps to your foundation, build up your knowledge building higher. Just keep going. So I know this is going to be a multiple answer question, but Dad, what is one of the coolest experiences that you have had as part of your career?
Well, you sent me the questions, and I sat there and I thought about which one, and that's really the challenge, and also the wonderful thing about my professional life is that there have been so many. Um, Certainly, when I had the opportunity back in about 2011 to work in southern Chile, in the Patagonia region of Chile, we were working on an endangered species of deer that was having a disease outbreak. I was asked to come in, and I spent 3 weeks in an 11 million acre national park that did not allow people. There were there were 12 people who worked for the park, and 8 of them were on a boat with me for 3 weeks. We saw things that you could only dream of seeing. From orcas and dolphins to whales, and true whales, all the way through to crazy, cool, endangered deer species and birds that I haven't seen before. So that was certainly one of them. On the other sort of, that's about as far south as you can go without going to Antarctica. On the northern side, as you know, I spent many, many years working on projects in Mongolia, sort of the other end of the spectrum, harsh, but amazingly beautiful, with a culture and people that are kind of like stepping back 200, 300 years in many ways. To me, those are sort of the bookends. I can think of all kinds of things that were sort of, you know, a medical case that I had, or somebody that I met, or an event that I went to. But I picked those because they were extended experiences that extended over time and over years, and have had the staying power that when I say, wow, when I look back, what's the couple of things? Those are top.
Thank you. And I've seen pictures from those trips, and they are incredible. So, very, very cool trips. And the culture in Mongolia is so fascinating to learn about. So, it's still something that I loved learning about and still love to learn about. It's very, very cool. So, I
Okay, before,
encourage.
before before we go on, though, I want to talk about the other side of this, because there is another side, and part of it was that in order to do these amazing things, I had to be absent a lot. I had to be gone a lot. There were many sort of milestones in your life, in your brother's lives, that I missed because I couldn't be there. Now, so that's a trade-off. What do you do? And so for the parents listening here, and for those of you who are thinking about way down the line of your career, and then when you want to have a family, how do you balance those things? I think that, what I did, what I hope will have worked, and I'll only know when I look back on it all at some time, was that I made sure that when I was home, I was as present as I could be. That, I was involved in your studies. I was involved in your reading every night, involved in your art projects. So that's the balance. And I know this isn't about being a parent, but it is a Father's Day celebration, and you can hear one of the dogs barking in the background. Sorry about that. That, we don't want to just talk about careers here, I don't think. I think we want to talk about full, enriched lives. And because that's the real success. It's not money, it's not career success, it's a full life. And so as you and your viewers watch this, think about that as well. There are trade-offs. Nothing comes without a cost, but you can get creative and you can find a way to maximize both of those. Sorry for interrupting.
Nope, that's okay. And that's a good point. There were many times that, you know, you weren't there for some stuff, but I did get to tell everyone that my dad was doing really cool stuff in the middle of the Gobi Desert and cool things like that. So, it kind of evened out for me.
Plus, I had to eat some really crazy, weird stuff too. So, I paid the price.
That's a whole nother interview, the stories about what he's eaten. And I don't know that our viewers can want to hear that, but many of them might be eating a meal as they watch. So we'll gloss over that. So, Dad, the next question is, what is a challenge that you faced on your journey and how did you overcome it? So often, we're all going to meet challenges in our lives, whether it's in work, in school, in this current situation that is just crazy. But sometimes it's helpful to learn from how others have overcome their challenges and taking those experiences and seeing how you can learn from that and use those tactics to overcome your own challenges. So we would love to learn from you.
I guess maybe I can try speaking of this generally and then get a little more specific. So, I I think as we're, we all know stereotypes, and when we think about scientists and engineers and mathematicians, we have this mental picture of a, you know, nerdy person, the pocket protector, and they're, scientists, and in fact that may be part of the many things that have been part of if not discouraging, at least not encouraging young women to pursue some of these careers.
Mhm.
But I think making sure that that you're broad in your foundation with the arts, with understanding how to interact with people, with this really interesting new sort of thing that's being talked about over the last decade or two called emotional intelligence. It allows you to solve the problems because the problems are often not about what they're about. I mean, you've heard me say that expression, all the time. It's not about what it's about. You have a blow up with somebody on a field project over, a methodology or how something was done. And it turns out it wasn't really about that. It was that you didn't say thank you for the dinner they made the night before and they were mad at you or something like that. So being able to balance, like we said, balancing the arts with science, I think it's really like a three-legged stool. We use that analogy a lot. The minimum number of legs you need for a stool for it to be stable is three. And one is this technical background. The second is creative outlets because they help so much with the other two. And the third is being present in the world, always striving to be better with the people that you're around. And that actually goes back to what you said was one of my greatest, it was my greatest challenge. I can think of one example, and I said I'd mention it. I was sort of midway in my pathway from being a hands-on veterinarian to becoming a CEO. I was now running a division, and it's not something that anybody trains you how to do. You come up as a technical person, and suddenly you're in charge. How do you do? And I was doing what I thought was best, and didn't realize, but found out that actually there was a huge level of discontent amongst my team. They weren't happy with me. So I had to do the really hard thing, and that's look inside, and say, okay, is what they're saying true? Is it accurate? And I began to realize that it didn't matter if it was true or accurate. It only mattered that that's how they saw it. And so if I worked on making some of those things better, it was a win-win situation. Because if they were correct and I made it better, then I showed that I was helping to address their concerns and make it better. And if they weren't correct and it was just, the politics or the social dynamics of being in an organization, then I was just making myself a better person. And stepping back from the confrontation, we all get into confrontations. We want to win. It's our nature. But to be able to step back from that and say, okay, we can fight about this thing, but maybe it's about this bigger issue. And how do I address the bigger issue? I think dealing with that the first time in my life, um, being successful in dealing with it, having members of the team come back and go, wow, we're really, we've noticed and we're really impressed with how you've tried to make things to address these issues. That was the hardest thing for me. It wasn't the hardest medical veterinary case. It wasn't the craziest location in the world. I'm sure I could tell you stories about, you know, dealing with police in this far off country when I had all this crazy equipment. Those are stories. This was a real personal challenge, and it took a lot to overcome. And I think about it regularly whenever I see that kind of situation in myself or those that I'm talking with.
Thank you. And that's really awesome advice. Knowing, when to listen, when to look inwards, um, to try to solve a problem, and not always, saying, well, it's right or wrong. It's not always as simple as that. And it's not as simple as, you know, you feel one way and everyone feels another way. You have to give and you have to take and you have to work together. And I think that's really important advice. And I know that you've given that to me, and it has greatly helped me in my life and my career. So I hope that it will help others here as well. So our next question is, what is some advice that you'd like to give to any young person wanting to pursue a career in a STEM field? You've given a lot of advice throughout this entire interview. Do you have anything that, you'd like to say that's like kid specific or teenager specific or even college age specific? Anything that you'd like to say?
Yeah, I think that it comes down to having the success in your career and in your life that you want. Comes down to having a couple of things, particularly at the beginning. And the first is the foundation. There are, particularly in fields like STEM, there are things you have to know. And there are also things you have to know how to find out if you don't know them. And there are things that you have to figure out because they may not even be known. Okay, so you have to have the foundation and a skill set to pursue those things. But that approach tends to narrow you down, makes you focus on something. If you were pursuing a graduate degree, and a PhD perhaps, you would be in a small slice of a small field, and you're surrounded with people who are in that same small slice of the same small field, and you tend to think it's the world, but it's not. So at the same time as being focused and focused on foundations and skills, I think you have to be able to have a wide view, think, as I would say, think laterally, think to the sides, because the best way, the best pathway to success may not be the straight path. It may be, having an interest in this and finding a way to get at it from another way around. Let me give you a small example. So in terms of some of the STEM fields, I have to say I have had as my core career a wildlife veterinarian, one of the things that is among the most highly prized. It's really hard to get into vet school. You have to go through vet school, and then have to compete with people for residencies, and there's very few positions, and they're not that well paid, and you do all these things to be able to go off and do this amazing field, to be the one taking care of the, whether it's the baby tiger or the adult rhinoceros or, whatever it may be. It's exciting. It's it's a sexy career, if you will. And so people want to come, and I, have lots of students who come and talk to me, and how do I do that? Well, we know that pathway is steep. We know there's a lot of competition. We know there's not very many opportunities. But if you look on what's on the edges of that, maybe not the person who is, doing the direct care, but instead is studying, let's say, epidemiology, which is the study of how diseases work in populations. You could be a veterinarian studying wildlife disease epidemiology, still working with all the same things, all the same people, and all the same places, but now in an angle that is more unique. And I think that as we see the world is changing, it's going to be the ability to see the other approaches to things that are going to be really important. And so that's the the advice I would give to your student or to your STEM girls. Different advice to parents, but that's the advice I would give to the STEM girls is strong foundation and think broadly. Even if you have a goal, think about what are things around that goal that would also help you achieve it. From the parent perspective, I think it's about encouraging exploration. I think it's about encouraging the foundation. As you know, I strongly believe that the most important parts of education, not the class you took, but knowledge acquisition, happen at home. Doesn't happen, sure, you could be in the greatest school district possible, or a private school, or you could be in a bad one. But what happens when you come home, when your parents or your siblings or your caretakers are engaged with you, or when you're young, reading with you, making sure they know what you're doing, staying on top of those things and finding ways to make them be part of your life, not just a punishment, is really critical.
That's great advice. And I think that that's something that I really held dear, and something that you instilled in me was thinking laterally and not limiting myself to just that small world of what I was studying. And I know that personally, that helped me a huge amount. And it continues to help me. And I have met so many interesting people in so many different walks of life just because of doing that. I was studying one thing in college, but I was in choirs as well. And no one in the choir was studying what I was studying, but they had this passion for something else. And then they had friends that were doing things that were similar to what I was studying. And it there's all these different paths to finding like-minded individuals and careers and opportunities, and it is not just one straightforward line. It branches all over the place, and I think that's really important for people to remember, that you don't have to just go in one solid path. There's so many different paths. Check them out. Take a walk on the wild side. Try something new. You never know what you're going to find. You never know what you're going to fall in love with. um, I think that's really, really important. And on the other side, the advice to parents, the those values that my dad and my mom instilled in me early on, of taking pride in multiple aspects in life, arts, sciences, everything, that greatly shaped who I am today and helps me every single day with the things that I do. And it is something that, working with children, I encourage all the time. I'm always encouraging, whether I'm talking to a child or a teen or a peer, or a parent, I always encourage checking out other things. You don't have to just focus on one thing. There's so many amazing things in this world and so many fun things to explore. Why limit yourself? That's a crime. So do yourself a favor, check it out, explore new things, try a new music, try cooking a new recipe, learn the science of that recipe. Why does it cook the way it cooks? There's so many cool ways to involve STEM in your life, and even step away from STEM for a little bit, but it's still making you such a well-rounded individual. And I highly encourage everyone to try that out, because it has greatly helped me become who I am today.
And
Um,
Becca, I think that that's also really the point and the real wonderfulness of this STEM Girls program. You can't be attracted to a pathway that you don't know about. It's kind of impossible. And we know what we experience in our day-to-day lives. So having a program like this that exposes young women to a diversity of careers and what those careers are like and what the life in that career is like, not just the details of the career, I think is really important. And I applaud the Cincinnati Museum Center for recognizing the value, and seeing you do these programs now in these strange times makes me very proud.
Thank you, Dad. So, one final question, and you did touch on a lot of advice for parents. But do you have any other advice for parents that are looking to keep their child engaged with STEM or foster an interest in these fields? Sometimes keeping a child engaged in the STEM field is what's the hardest aspect. Because there are these pressures to, you know, be one way, or, you know, there's the thought of it being nerdy or anything like that. And I personally love being a nerd. So I see nothing wrong with that. But sometimes, you know, there's different connotations with different things. And I think it's important to keep your child engaged. And that was something that you always really instilled in me. So, is there any advice that's specific to that that you would like to give?
Well, look, I can only talk about what I know and my own experiences, and I feel very proud that, your mom and I have raised three children that are all doing amazing things that we're very proud of. So that's great. So is our way right or wrong? I don't know. But I can tell you that there are things that you can do. And most important is to be present and participate. When your children are young, reading with them, it becomes, first of all, you can make it a ritual. And I think ritualizing things, particularly when children are young, is really helpful. It gives a pattern, it gives something to look forward to. So reading with, um, your young children is really important. And it doesn't matter, there could be parents watching today say, well, that's all well and good. You know, she was raised by two parents that are well educated with, advanced degrees. And of course she would turn out that way. But I don't think it matters. I think what matters is that you participate, that you learn with your child, and that you create, you support their inquiry as best you can. It's not always possible, but you can always, everybody can find a way to participate. So if you participate, it just builds a different relationship with you and your child. You have a common interest, a common theme, and they build on each other. So it's really just, it's that. It happens at home. Don't blame the teachers. Work with the teachers. Doesn't matter the school district that you go to. Doesn't matter what your educational background is. You can participate and, encourage diverse thinking. You don't have to agree with a certain perspective, but I think the more diversity that we can expose our children to help them think through things and see differences in people, in communities, and cultures in the world, all those things, seeing differences makes us better citizens because we recognize that it's not just our way. And those two things together, I think, are what make a healthy, productive professional, whether they be in the STEM fields or in any other field. And I guess that's my point at the end of the day. A lot of this isn't STEM specific. It's encouraging, your child to have to have curiosity, to be inquisitive and explore the world. And if they do that with the right foundations, the rest will take care of itself.
I think that's fantastic advice. And to further the point that my dad made about just being present, and you don't have to be an expert in the field, or any field, to just be present with your child and still encourage them to pursue STEM things. For example, I mean, my parents are both really good at math. I'm not so great at math, and that is
Oh,
something I
no,
accept.
sorry, your mom is not good at math. Sorry.
Well, she's gonna see this video,
And
Dad.
I'm not that great at math either. There you go. I'm not a huge math guy.
No,
You
but
know?
they still were present. Both of my parents were present and helping me to learn math. And, you know, while I still not so great at math, um, it wasn't about, that that they were experts in the field of math. They were present in the field of math, and that helped me be more confident in that field of my studies. No, I'm not a mathematician, and no, I'm still not great at it. But if I didn't have that presence of my parents keeping me going and telling me I could do it, I probably would have given up much, much faster as a child. And so it's important just to be present in everything that you do. And that's not just for parents, that's for kids and teens and anyone watching. Be present in what you're doing, listen, learn, explore. It's so important. In today's day and age, there's so many distractions. Try to be present in what you're doing. And you can do anything. So that is all we have for today. Dad, thank you so much for coming and hanging out with me virtually. It's it's odd to see my home, my childhood home behind you in this interview, but I'm over here. So, but thank you for joining us and making this episode very special. We really appreciate it.
Really a pleasure, Becca, and even more so a pleasure to be part of this as your father. It's great.
Thank you, Dad.
Congratulations.
And thank you to not only all the viewers out there, but to all the dads out there and all the parents. Thank you for keeping your kids engaged and interested and helping them pursue their dreams and their passions, whether it's long-term or short-lived. It matters, and it helps us do everything that we want to do when we are big kids. I won't say an adult because I still think of myself as a big kid. So thank you to my parents, to my mom, to my dad. Thank you to all the parents out there. Everyone, please keep watching the videos that Cincinnati Museum Center is putting out. We have vintage beauty tutorials, story tree time for our younger audience. We have museum on tap events for our older audience. We have all these opportunities to keep learning and keep learning as a family. So happy Father's Day and keep learning, Cincinnati. Bye, everyone.
Bye.